Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning, colleagues. I rise to discuss House Bill 1950 for a few minutes, and I know, like you, you may feel we've been over this issue for some years now. At this point, we certainly have held multiple hearings. I think we as members have done a decent job of trying to research the issues and take a look at what's out there in terms of tax policy, environmental impacts, and so forth. The Majority Appropriations Chairman mentioned something that I want to highlight and go into just a bit further. And that's what companies look for when they look at whether they're going to stay in Pennsylvania or perhaps relocate to another state. And that is their overall tax burden. It's been said, of course, accurately that we're in a competitive situation on this with some of the other gas states, Texas, Arkansas, West Virginia, and so forth. But we have to look, Mr. Speaker, at the overall tax burden. And financial professionals look at the overall tax burden of a given state when they decide whether they're going to locate a plant, a factory there. And Pennsylvania, of course, as we know, has the second highest CNI rate in the United States. The rest of our tax burden is already relatively high. And for that reason, I think we're taking the proper approach in 1950 with keeping our burden modest on the natural gas industry. There are a range of tax burdens across the nation. Texas has no CNI. We have 9.9%. Then there are those that are blended. They're mixed. Arkansas, Louisiana, West Virginia. But because Pennsylvania's tax burden in the rest of its taxes is high, we need to be very careful about how we approach taxation of the natural gas industry. I think with 1950, we're coming in at about the right level. We are coming in at a level that will make Pennsylvania competitive, desirable in terms of locating businesses. Secondly, there is this myth that I've been hearing out there that somehow the natural gas industry doesn't pay any taxes. I keep hearing this out there. It's on the internet. We hear it in various reports. And so I did some digging. Mr. Speaker, I went into Department of Revenue records and started looking. The Department of Revenue classifies each line of revenue by NICS code, so they can tell from whence their tax receipts come. And they have a code specific to the oil and gas drilling industry. Mr. Speaker, I compared 2008 with the most recent year, 2010, and what we see, in fact, is significant increases in tax revenue flowing to the state based on oil and gas drilling activity. We could say that over the last 6 years, Department of Revenue has said we've taken in $1.1 billion in total added revenue from the gas drilling activity. But I'll give you some specifics. Comparing 08 to 10, we've taken in an additional $14 million in corporate net income, $14.5 million sales and use, $18 million in employer withholding, and in personal income tax. Personal income tax, that's driven by those landowners out there who are signing drilling leases and who are getting royalty checks. Between 08 and 10, an added $58.5 million in tax receipts to the coffers of the state of Pennsylvania. Clearly, this is a tide that's rising, and Pennsylvania state government is reaping the benefit from this added revenue. Mr. Speaker, thirdly, I'd like to just chat for a minute, if I may, about the ATR, the Grover-Norquist situation. And I appreciate that on my side of the aisle, and I'm not sure if there's a few on the other side, some number of members have signed pledges with regard to their commitment not to raise taxes. Mr. Speaker, I stand before you as a member who has not voted for a tax increase in his 8.5 years of service in this House. I did not sign Mr. Norquist's pledge. I didn't feel that I should, and I'll tell you why. Because, Mr. Speaker, I come to this chamber, and every 2 years I raise my hand and I swear an oath. I swear an oath to represent fairly and honestly the 62,000 citizens of the 99th Legislative District, my end of Eastern Lancaster County. Mr. Speaker, I think that is the highest obligation that I maintain as a legislator. And I recognize that some of my good friends on the more conservative side are very bound in conscience at this point. But I would ask you to reach down inside yourself and ask, what is that most important pledge that I take as a representative in this House? And it is, Mr. Speaker, that oath that you take when you raise your hand and you pledge to defend our Constitution, both state and federal, and to conduct the duties of your office with fidelity. And so I call upon you to reach for that higher pledge, that oath that you take when you come here. And Mr. Speaker, finally, what is it in all of this that we seek? And I think this is across the state and in both sides of the aisle. From House Bill 1950, we seek an impact fee structure, quite frankly, that deals with the environmental and infrastructure needs connected to drilling activity. Mr. Speaker, it's an exciting prospect, but one that we have to do right. We have to do it carefully. There will be mishaps along the way, and we want those things dealt with. We want funds available to address the environmental issues. Roads will degrade, and we want funds available to fix those roads. House Bill 1950 provides funds for both environmental needs and for infrastructure needs. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, we want a modernized regulatory structure. We want a structure in regulation that meets the science of drilling right where it is today. And House Bill 1950 does that. It is a modernization of the regulatory structure that will enable state regulators to hold drillers accountable. And that's exactly what citizens are calling for, and they're doing so because we all want our water to be clean. We want our environment protected. And when we look back at the landscape, we look back at the history of Pennsylvania, and quite frankly, those piles of slag that still exist from a coal industry of 100 years ago, Mr. Speaker, we do not want a repeat of what happened environmentally to this state. House Bill 1950 provides a modernized regulatory environment that will protect our environment, our water, our natural resources on into the future. But Mr. Speaker, finally, as has been stated, when we think about those citizens back in our home districts, and we think what's the need of the hour, number one has got to be jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 1950 provides a step on the road to a more vibrant Pennsylvania economy, an economy that is generating jobs, tens of thousands potentially. Too many of our citizens, our friends, and our neighbors are locked into long-term unemployment. In my own county, Lancaster County, which is a long way from the gas region, the Marcellus region, if you will, one of our leading engineering firms has added hundreds of good family-sustaining jobs because of civil engineering activity up in the gas and oil patch. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a rising tide that's lifting all boats all across Pennsylvania, not just in the oil and gas region, but in my home area of Lancaster County, and I am confident all across our state. House Bill 1950 is the key step to take us to a vibrant future, a stronger economy, and an economy that is both growing but is done in a way that respects and protects our environment. Mr. Speaker, I ask for a yes vote on House Bill 1950.